discussing issues of importance in our daily lives.
Antithesis airs Sunday afternoon at 5:30.
I'm Richard Curtis.
I'm Leo Griep-Ruiz.
The opinions expressed on Antithesis are the opinions of the person speaking them,
and do not necessarily represent the views of the board, staff, or management of KGNU or of us here at Antithesis.
because I might not agree with him.
And I might not agree with him. My long hair is turning gray. My mustache and chin whiskers will soon be entirely white. I use a cane, especially when the barometer drops, and occasionally people open doors for me and smile. Teenagers make room respectfully with a moment's eye contact and an almost imperceptible nod. I'm even called sir from time to time, and I like it. Of course, this happens mostly in Mexican, black, and Asian shops and neighborhoods, rarely in affluent Boulder or in more affluent Cherry Creek, except at that huge box of a bookstore. But even there, the open-minded patrons of literature don't move with the easy grace of cordiality, but with the eyes averted, stiff-necked, tight-butt, back-turning avoidance that people of color, particularly men, are familiar with as the most common form of contact with European Americans. I was discussing this with a friend in Boulder recently, a white woman well known for her open mind, good heart, and progressive spirit. She said that some people...
Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by. We will return to our regularly scheduled program momentarily. Please stay tuned.
That some people find me somehow threatening and absurdly self-fulfilling prophecy, since what you see is what you get. My wife and I have discussed this over the years, and she believes that it's the result of racism and Eurocentrism. Racism is based on physical attributes. Eurocentrism, on the other hand, is intellectual and psychological. My wife thinks that because I'm almost as tall as the average white man, I cannot be relegated to the category of cute little brown person whom paternalistic liberals like to pat on the head in their flavor of the month interest and concern. She further believes that I threaten the Eurocentrics' innate sense of intellectual superiority because I am fluent in various English and Spanish dialects, and because of my freakishly large vocabulary, the result of a voraciously eclectic reading habit. Of course, this don't make me no better than nobody else out there, because educated and smart are not the same thing. They are often mutually exclusive. Political speeches, talk shows, and eavesdropping in a faculty lounge will give ample proof of that. Our white friend, however, attributed this perceived air of menace to certain of my sartorial habits. Headbands, for example, what we call paliacates, what the Japanese call hachimaki. Among my people, men commonly wear them. In barrios and on reservations, we just blend together. The same is true on any Pacific island or in the Andes, where long hair, mustaches, and chin whiskers are so common as to escape comment. Middle-class white folks have only readopted beards and mustaches during the past 20 years. The last major mustachioed presidential candidate was Thomas E. Dewey in 1948, and who knows, maybe his cookie duster cost him the election. Harry Truman wasn't Harry, was he? The indigenous peoples of this continent, of the Pacific Rim and Basin, and of Asia and Africa regard facial hair as a sign of maturity. For us, the old man's sparse white whiskers, Ho Chi Minh, Lao Tzu, are a mark of distinction. Euro-American culture, however, morbidly denies human mortality by eschewing signs of maturity and subconsciously associates them with fear and danger. This is absurd. We have a saying, cuidado con el cara de pendejo. Watch out for anyone looking foolishly harmless. They might be setting you up. Funny, isn't it? If white folks wear berets, they look like artists. If we wear berets, we look like guerrillas. If a white man wears a hat and an overcoat, he's a gentleman. We're gangsters. If a white man doesn't shave for a couple of days, he looks like a Calvin Klein model, but we're scary. Is it our responsibility to change ourselves so that we don't disturb the serenity of the otherwise placidly uptight? A genuine multiculturalism should be based on mutual respect, not on reducing our respective expressions of culture to the lowest common tolerable denominator, not on abandoning any aspect of culture which does not infringe upon the rights of others, not on forsaking the cultural distinctions which our forebears cultivated in spite of inquisitors, lynch mobs, and death squads. In our traditional societies, our elders are respected as sources of wisdom and as vessels of culture. Our dear white-haired old ones are the ones who know the stories, the humble ones who counsel and console us so that we can learn from past victories and defeats. How different it is in the dominating society whose senior citizens are commonly warehoused out of the way somewhere until they can be hermetically disposed of under a flat headstone which will not obstruct the lawnmower, while the philosophical founders of that society are touted as the pinnacles of wisdom and erudition. The current debate among Euro-Americans about whether the young should pay for the old is a frightening indicator of their fundamental intracultural and intergenerational alienation. I can speak of this because long ago I was a victim of that alienation. I am in debt to my elders who brought me back to the bosom of my people. They safeguarded our culture until I was ready to carry it on. Now it's my responsibility to care for it and to promulgate it among our youth so that it will not be lost. Not an easy thing to do, since the gift that my ancestors gave me is the warrior's task of maintaining and transmitting a culture of resistance to colonization and genocide. But I don't mind. Knowing where we stand in history stimulates our minds, lifts our hearts, and stirs our spirits, banishing anxiety and alienation. That's why we laugh so much.
Leo, you know, I never thought about it, but you do look like Ho Chi Minh.
See? There we go. There we go. I'm 5'10". Ho Chi Minh was maybe 5'3", if that tall.
Well, you're all short to me.
You know, I mean, he was, this skinny little cat. I'm pushing 200 plus pounds.
Yeah, but you're sitting down now.
Well,
so
I'm sitting down, right. So there you are.
you look
sitting.
like Ho Chi Minh. With glasses.
I am honored to
Never
be compared to my Uncle Ho.
Uncle Ho. Hey, have you ever noticed how you've never seen Santa Claus, Jerry Garcia, and Karl Marx all in the same place at the same time?
Because I don't think any of them want to be in the same place at the same time.
Maybe they're the same person.
Well, gee, I never thought of that, Richard.
That
I
thing
got to
about
hand it
beards.
to you. It's not often that an entirely new thought enters my realm of perception. And now you have brought an entirely new thought.
Welcome to radio.
You know, that's like the reason that you never saw Golda Meir and Lyndon Johnson together.
I've heard that one, though.
You've
But
heard
you may
that
be
one.
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
people
you
have
know,
speculated for quite some time.
there's lots of other similar speculation. You know, I can't think of offhand of people like that. But how about that stuff? Here you are sitting there. How tall are you?
6'5".
6'5". Now, to a typical Central American,
That's
a typical
kinda tall.
Asian, they would look at you and think that because of the caloric intake that you need just to keep from shriveling up and blowing away, that you got to eat twice as much as them. Therefore, we could say that anybody who's over whatever the height is like counterproductive.
Okay, over 6 foot.
But I don't
You
know.
know, is that why the little kids in Mexico laugh when I visit?
Oh, there are probably a couple other things.
They're
but
not-
we really shouldn't get into
They
that.
never seem to be afraid, but they always laugh.
Well,
I don't know
it's
what
kind of,
that's
you look,
about.
you see this, I mean, what would you do if the Jolly Green Giant, walked into your backyard?
And I was 7, I'd probably laugh.
I mean, so here you are, clean-shaven, relatively short hair,
No, well,
6'5".
I think it's the light-colored hair in real time. Anyway,
So-
this thing about preserving culture, we should talk about that, because that's, I think, what you were really getting at. And
Well-
it may be more important than whether Karl Marx and Jerry Garcia were the same person.
I think just about anything is more important.
And whether they're
I
both
mean,
Santa
I don't know
Claus.
anybody, like in the barrio, nobody ever even noticed. How can you say a name like Garcia, and the cat is, like, totally outside of, nobody thought of him as a spick.
Oh, he was one
Nobody
white
thought
guy.
of Jerry Garcia, even saying it, Jerry Garcia, as a carnal.
And he was Jewish.
That has nothing to do with it because, there's Jews everywhere. That's not the issue. There's
being
plenty
a uniquely Jewish name.
There's the whole tradition of crypto-Sephardic people throughout southern Colorado and northern New Mexico and into central, throughout all of Mesoamerica. There are a lot of people who came over at that time, right, when the Inquisition was going strong after 1492, who were Jews. You know the charming word that was used for Jews who converted to Catholicism?
No.
Marrano.
I've heard that.
Marrano, yeah. It's the word. You read it in the book. You know what a marrano is?
No.
It literally, it means swine.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's not very nice.
No, it's not. Not at all. And so there is a tradition of many people in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado in particular having certain things that they did on certain days of the week that they might have done privately and done quietly.
Yeah.
But there is a
kind
tradition.
of mysterious.
So the idea of Jewishness and Chicanismo
Garcia.
somehow being mutually exclusive, that's nothing,
No.
But the fact is that Jerry Garcia was totally irrelevant to the experience in the barrio. So it never even occurred to us that when the name Garcia was connected to the name Jerry, that it had anything to do with raza. Because it had nothing to do with raza.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I want to give you a hard time about this culture thing.
Okay, go ahead. Give me a hard time.
Because that's one of those things where I have to confess that I disagree with you.
Well,
why does it matter? I mean, why does it matter? This culture thing.
That's a question that is, I don't even know why it matters.
Well, the issue is human rights, isn't it? That's really what you're on about.
The
is that
issue has
people
to do,
deserve dignity.
I think that only people who come out of a non-culture can ask the question of why does culture matter?
Well, actually, people have been asking it since long before me, people with various cultures.
The idea of who a person is based intrinsically, is essentially wrapped up in the concept of culture.
But see, I would propose to you that the very concept of culture itself is just a phenomenal abstraction from the way they live.
A phenomenal abstraction from the way they live. Okay, let me give you a little example. I made some earrings.
Yeah, so you're an artist.
Well, I don't know about that word either, but I made earrings, and among raza. And when I use the term raza, I'm referring. It's a kind of a bad word. We're stuck with Spanish, but and raza actually means like breed. Like breed of horses, breed of cows, and stuff like that. But the term is sort of used generically to mean people of indigenous ancestry, people who are a part of the greater Mesoamerican cultural complex.
Right.
See corn. See the symbol of corn. See an ear of corn. And what we see in that is all of who we are. I had people say to me who were not of the raza, corn. Now, Chicanos would see them go, oh, cool, and Chicanos bottom up quick, But non-raza saw these ears of corn and said, well, I like corn, but I never wear them on my ears.
But I bet if you take yourself to Kansas, in the farmland, you'll find that people have the same kind of identification with corn. It may take different forms, but it's the same sort of value.
No.
Well, in a community that farms corn, makes its living from corn, corn is going to be a little bit important.
It has been commodified into meaning money in the bank, but it does not have the same sense of meaning that throughout not just Mesoamerica, but throughout a lot of the Andean region, it means to us, because we look at that and we see what I assume a devout Catholic would see when the priest raises that host and says, this is the body and blood of Christ. That that to us, corn is the stuff of our human existence in its most deeply felt form. Among traditional Mayan people, human beings are a phase of the life cycle of corn.
Well, yes, but most people
essential
don't really structure their lives that way.
Being. Well, because most people don't do that. That's merely saying that other people have other cultures. Among Hawaiians,
Right.
kalo, the taro, is that stuff which is essential to their being. And where we're getting at, and what we're demonstrating right here, right now, is the concept of ontological differences, that even though we may share human flesh and share a similar anatomy, and that we are still living in entirely different universes.
Entirely different universe.
In entirely different universes.
Really?
Yeah.
No, see, I guess I don't go
See,
with you
we
there.
share a certain time-space continuum, but there are, that's what an ontology refers to. That word ontology refers to
Being.
all of the way of being. And one of the things that we're capable of doing, those of us who do have a sense of continuity to those ancestors who first came to know themselves as a people upon this land, one of the things that we share is a profoundly different ontology than many other people who don't have that.
But see, I don't believe that that's really what matters. I mean, you sound serious and you look serious talking about it, but still I don't believe it. That's not what really matters. I mean, if people in the Andes were being slaughtered in a culture that encouraged them to maintain this sense of history and this relationship with sacred objects, would that be a good thing?
That would, of course, not be a good thing. And to say that that would be, that the only alternative to that is giving up those ways and giving up the identity and giving up their relationship with elemental forces, then I would say that you're positing a false dichotomy, that there is much, much more than saying either you do this stuff and you get slaughtered or you give all of that up and become McDonaldized.
Oh, I would never advocate McDonaldization. I think we all know that. What I'm saying is that culture is not the point of the struggle. And that when we confuse the struggle for human rights with the struggle for culture, then we have sacrificed everything and we achieve nothing.
I would say that the struggle for culture is an inseparable element of the struggle for human rights.
Well, and you're coming out of a place, a culture, interactions with people, where that's a very powerful organizing tool.
It's more than an organizing tool. It's
that's where I want to challenge you.
Ordering. It's a tool of ordering one's entire relationship with all of the physical and non-physical manifestations of the cosmos.
Yes, but in the end, it's important to you because it's an organizing tool to achieve justice for people, for human beings.
It's much, much, much more than an organizing tool. It is essential to what it is to be a human being.
Now, see, that I think you have to demonstrate somehow, because human beings run all over the planet and think all kinds of things, and
or
the
maybe
fact that
I
they
should
do
say it's
one
essential.
Oneness, and how is that essential?
It's essential to being a humane being.
Well, having a culture, I mean, we all need culture. We all have cultures, and certainly there are some that are more interesting than others, and some that may be more, fruitful in other ways. Maintaining the values of Native Americans with regard to the environment is certainly something all of us could learn from. But should we learn from it because it is sacred, or should we learn from it because it's just a really good idea?
I would really not separate the idea of sacred from the idea of good.
But you would chastise other cultures for their claims of sacrality.
Not necessarily. I would chastise other cultures to the extent that their expressions of the sacred infringe on the rights of others. If someone else's, let's look at the Christian identity movement, for example, right-wing, racist, white folks are on top of everybody else kind of attitude, right?
We talked about them last week, didn't we?
They would say that it is their sacred duty to obliterate mud people from the earth.
Do they say that?
Some of them.
That's a really weird thing to say.
Some of them, yeah. It's very, I had Sean Slater call me a mud man. I go, mud man? He said, yeah, Mudman, mongrel. I said, gee, Mudman, the water of life combined with the stuff of my Mother Earth, Mudman. I like that. Thanks, Sean. You see, now that right there was a profound and deep statement of a certain ontological perspective. Now, if
ontological perspective?
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's the part where I haven't heard you answer my question yet, is because I don't believe that there's anything ontological about that. There's something poetic about it. I'll grant you that. It's very poetic, especially in that context. Very poetic. But even in, just in any context, you're right. It's something poetic about the waters of life, and Mother.
But it's beyond.
Anyway,
it goes well beyond poetic.
I think that's the part you have to demonstrate to me.
How can I demonstrate it to you when I would argue that what you are manifesting as a left brain dominance makes you incapable of understanding it, since you're not functioning in the realm of a left and right brain integration?
Oh, well, that was harsh. Harsh on Richard.
Well,
didn't I concede it was poetic?
That poetic is not enough.
Okay, then what is enough?
What is enough, I would suggest, is developing a sense of who you are through time. A sense of an identity that is connected and not alienated from those of your ancestors who first came to know themselves as a people upon that place of origin.
And you're right. That to me is not so important, because my people, they came from Norway. It's not real exciting, I guess. If I lived closer to ice, I might get into it,
QED,
but I don't.
There it is. There it is.
How is that relevant? I mean, I'm deeply concerned with the issue of human rights.
With what?
And yet Norwegianness is kind of irrelevant to me, because it's not operative to the struggle. Now, that's what I'm saying. I respect how it's operative to the struggle for you, and it is in some quarters. What I'm questioning is its ontological significance.
I was reading a book about saunas, and I thought, okay, because we have certain ceremonies, throughout this land, and I know as well as in Hawaii, people have ceremonies where they combine the four elements: water, air, earth, fire. In Hawaii, people use certain sites of volcanic activity and hydrothermal activity for ceremonies similar to the kinds that many of our people in this hemisphere have. And so I was really interested in this business of the sauna, because I saw the same elements, at least as a physical level, all being combined there. And I read in this book where it said, back in the old days, people had this superstition where they had some kind of ceremonies in there, and they wrote it off. What I see occurring in this land, a process that was unleashed 500 and some odd years ago upon this continent, a process of attempting to genericize people and remove them from their indigenous roots, is a process which has been underway in Europe for 1,500, 2,000 years, some length of time. It's possible to look at European history and see a time when left brain dominance was posited as the superior way of being. We go back to Aristotle and back to Plato, the so-called fathers of Western philosophy and all of that. And from that time, we see a process of alienation from people's roots, alienation from their relationship to the elemental forces in the world all around them. And since that time, we have seen a certain ideology spread forth upon the world, kind of like a can of Sherman-Williams paint. It's not just because Europeans are taller, bigger, eat more, way more, that we have seen a domination of a certain way of being upon the face of the earth. I firmly believe that the reason that we've seen domination of this capitalist monster upon the planet is because people have been so alienated from the elements of an essential humanity that they are willing to even sacrifice their own people for the sake of power over others. And I would trace that back to that time.
I can't go with you down that road either.
Well, that's it's obvious that we disagree.
So you're going to say that because Western European culture finds its roots in the intellectual philosophical traditions of ancient Greek philosophers, that this somehow caused them to become evil, greedy people.
Part of it, yeah.
And by native peoples holding onto their cultures, they are positing a counterforce to the ultimate cause of this evil, greedy nature.
If we speak of native peoples as those peoples who have maintained left brain / right brain functions simultaneously, yeah.
Well, perhaps it's possible that the cultures that you're most in touch with, these cultures of resistance, are most in touch with the natural world and are most in touch with their, the people are most in touch with their own humanity because they are involved in a struggle of resistance.
We tend to share, I say this because I know I've run with West Africans, with a West African warrior society, people who practice their traditional ways there. I've had pretty good associations over a long term with traditional Hawaiian people, as well as with people throughout the general Mesoamerican region, getting up into Lakota country and south through the Mayan lands into the southernmost reaches of the Nahuatl language-based peoples. And in general, we share a view that a complete human being is an instrument of beauty and a slayer of monsters. The idea of being warriors in defending our people is something that is essential to the ontology. The idea that it will always be the role of a mature human being to confront the monster that would eat the people. That's also essential.
Okay, but what I'm asking is it those ideas, those cultural forms which encourage resistance, or is it the very fact of resistance that encourages the propagation of those cultural forms?
I think that both of those things are valid. I think that from the perspective of people who are coming out of the culture, that it's the former. And I think that in many cases, people are brought back into the bosom of the traditional people because of the latter.
Okay. And a bigger issue, is it possible that free people living in a free society would develop a culture, and a very multifaceted culture, far superior to the one we find in the United States of America today?
Oh,
and
I think
they would do that by virtue of disregarding the historical significance of the cultures that they came out of, but by freely creating new cultures that are expressions of a free humanity.
The oldest of the traditions is adaptation and adoption. The oldest of our traditions is adapting that which is useful and disregarding that which is not useful. And I think that's something that people tend to not realize, especially looking at the New Age phenomenon, for example. We see that there is a general disregard for the empirical experiences of the ancestors.
Well, but I think the New Age is an example of an alienated culture coming out of an alienated experience.
Oh yeah, coming out of
nothing
tremendous alienation
that.
and not understanding that they can't just go around and pick and choose, from the world's cultures as if they're at some sort of a smorgasbord. That you have to be committed to something.
Right, but is it necessary to be committed to the particular something that you came out of, or is it necessary to be committed to principle of justice, and that something, whatever, doesn't matter, it's irrelevant, something will come out of that, something organic will come out of that?
They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. However, from the perspective of the elders of our traditional societies, someone who is not functioning fully within an economic, a social, political, and a spiritual perspective is less than a complete human being. And a lot of the folks who merely concern themselves with this concept of justice without having a fully integrated experience, without being involved in the spiritual as well as in the emotional, the social, and the economic aspects of life, is pretty much perceived as a child.
Well, you're getting into something very complicated with psychology, and I'm not sure I want to go down that road with you either.
Well, I don't know what roads I really want to go down with you, but we're finding out, aren't we?
And it looks like we're out of time again.
And this is one of those, yet again, where I didn't agree with Richard.
Well, I guess I didn't agree with Leo.
So,
Well, that's why we call it Antithesis.
that's what it's all about, folks. So just remember, whatever you hear, I'm right.
Oh, yeah, Leo's right. Write that down. Thanks for listening. This is Antithesis, Sunday evenings on KGNU Boulder.